We still have one more item under clause 30 related to the certificates and payment for the PAM contract. This is related to the interest. So far we have made several videos related to clause 30 here. Among those related to the interim certificate, the set-off by the employer, the retention fund, the suspensions of the work, the final account, the penultimate certificates, and the final certificate. Now we will discuss a bit in terms of the interest. This one can be found in clause 30.17. When we talk about the interest, this is one of the matters to be resolved separately between the employer and the contractor, which is not included in the final account. Based on the statement here, the interest is payable by either of the party to another party. That means the interest may be charged by the contractors to the employer, or may be charged by the employer to the contractor, depending on the situations. Therefore, we will see two kinds of situations here. The first situations, it will be the employer debt to the contractor. That means is the employer supposed to pay to the contractor the debt plus the interest. Now, if the employer fails to pay the contractor for any certificates after the periods of honouring certificate, you know that these periods of honouring certificates is typically 21 days. Once the interim certificates is issued or the final certificates is issued, that means there shall be payment by the employer to the contractor. The payment should be made within the period of honouring certificate. Not being able to pay the contractor on time, and this has exceeded the limits in terms of the periods of honouring certificate, the contractors have the right to charge the interest to the employer. Of course, the relevant amount is to be minus with any liquidated damage and the set-off. You know that when it comes to the liquidated damage and set-off, the contractor should also aware of that. The rate for the liquidated damage has already been agreed both sides, as per specified in the appendix. Once non-completion of the work occurs, the employer has the right to charge the liquidated damage onto the contractor. The calculations will be on daily basis. And when come to the set-off, there will be a list of the conditions that the set-off is valid. And when the set-off is to be take place, this shall be made known to the contractor in terms of the amount and the reasons. It's supposedly to be agreed both sides for the set-off to be taken place. Any disagreements may escalate the issues to the adjudications under clause 34.1. Now, after minusing this liquidated damage and also set-off, when the employer still owes money to the contractor and not being able to pay on time, interest shall be imposed. The interest will be imposed to the outstanding amount, and it is based on the base lending rate of a specified bank plus 1%. And the interest is calculated until the date of the payments made. Now, in the case that the contractor is in debt to the employer, within 21 days after the receipt of written notifications regarding the debt by the employer, the interest rate will be imposed. the calculations for the interest will be the same as stated here, which is based on the base lending rate of a bank plus 1% until to the date of the payments made. Now, whoever owns to the other parties shall have to clear their payment. Exceeding the limit, interest should be charged. And the duration limit here is typically 21 days, both for the contractors and also the employer, as we know that the periods of honoring certificates is also 21 days. So this is to be fair to both sides. Since now we talk about the base lending rate, which is related to the interest, I would like to expand our discussions related to this base lending rate. So far, there are three terms related to the lending rates. We have the base lending rate, BLR, base rate, BR, and standardized base rate, SBR. This base lending rate here is now obsolete. It is applicable before year 2015 in Malaysia. They transformed this base lending rate into the base rate from 2015 until August of 2022. After that, starting from the August 2022 onward, it will be standardized base rate. This one is related to the housing mortgage, doing the personal loan with the bank, deciding on the lending rates. For a typical construction project, I'm not sure whether the base lending rate is still applicable, which I believe is no longer applicable. That's why I feel you should know about this BLR, BR, and SBR. What is for sure? This BLR is no longer applicable for housing loan. For the period before August 2022, the base rate shall be applied. And then after August 2022 onward, the standard base rate shall be applied. Now, what are the differences of all these three? It stands on the basic equation here. The lending rate for a loan shall be equals to a reference rate, which is on basis of the overnight policy rate given by Bank Negara Malaysia. This reference rate, it will be referring to this OPR given by the Bank Negara Malaysia. And then the reference rate is to be plus with the spread, which ultimately equals to the lending rate. The spread here is referring to the profit of the bank, how much the bank would like to profit from your loan. And this spread here is very much dependent on your credit worthiness. What does it mean by the credit worthiness? It is whether you pay the loan or pay the installment on time with good discipline. Do you keep your promise? Do you have any delay payment or non-payment to the bank? The bank should have your record. Based on your track record, they will know your paying habit. If you are really good payer to the bank, that means you are very disciplined. You always pay on time, and the banks likes that. To them, you have low risk factor. Then you will have a high credit worthiness. If you are the person that always delays your payment or frequently miss the payment, as far as the bank concerned, your payment is inconsistent, unpredictable. Because of this uncertainty here, the bank will have to bear with certain levels of risk, and as a result, your credit worthiness will be lower. Now, a person with high credit worthiness, low risk to the bank, the interest chargeable to the person is normally lower. Then the person with low creditworthiness, high risk to the bank, then the interest charge and the spread here will be slightly higher than the others. Now settle the creditworthiness part. We look into the item by item for different types of the lending rate. First, we look at the base lending rate. In short form, we call it BLR. It constitutes the reference rate, which is referring to the OPR given by the Bank Negara, and the bank internal standard will standardize a rate, which is same across the board to all the customer. Now each bank will have its own internal standard. Therefore, this percentage of the interest shall differ among different banks, but it will be standardized to the customers for that particular bank. You will see some banks have higher interest here and some banks will have lower interest here. And then having this interest as a basis here, they will look into your creditworthiness and deduct the interest here in order to lower down the interest, which ultimately imposed to the borrowers. This percentage here is a constant. That means it will be the same throughout the mortgage or loan, but it will be differ among different borrowers. The difference here, it will be due to the creditworthiness of different borrowers. When we talk about this part to be constant, that means this interest here may be fluctuating over the time, and this is on basis of this overnight policy rate given by the Bank Negara, depending on the conditions of the economy in Malaysia. If we are talking about the housing loan, normally the durations of the installments is rather long. It can easily go more than 10 years, depending on the situations. Some may go for 10 years, some may go for 20 years, some may go for 30 years. So now this interest here, the amount to be minus here will remain constant, but this part will be fluctuating. The fluctuations will be in reference to the overnight policy rate given by the Bank Negara. So this is about the base lending rate. Now we look at the base rate here, BR. The concept here is similar to the base lending rate. The main difference here is plus and minus here. So now the rate here normally is a larger value, which is meant to be minus with the interest related to the creditworthiness. When come to the base rate here, the interest here will be normally smaller, and depending on your creditworthiness, a certain percentage of the interest shall be added. Again, this plot is fluctuating due to the OPR, and it is standardized internally within a specific bank, which differs among different banks, and the creditworthiness will determine the amount of percentage of interest shall be added. This will be constant throughout the installment period, and the interest here shall differ among different borrowers based on their creditworthiness. You can consider this as a total opposite of this. Initially, a big value here to be minus based on the creditworthiness, but when come to the base rate here, it is a smaller value to be plus with the interest related to the creditworthiness. What happened here is there is no standardizations among different banks. Different banks may offer differently in terms of the reference rate here. Now the latest policy here, starting from August 2022, they would like to standardize this part. That's why they call it as standardized base rate. This is basically an extension of this base rate here. Only now the interest here is standardized throughout all the banks in Malaysia. You will not see different interest from different banks now. Everything here shall be standardized, and it is fluctuating in accordance to the OPR as given by the Bank Negara Malaysia. The only things that going to be fluctuating is the interest related to the credit worthiness. This will be the part where the bank making profits out of you, depending on your risk factor. This part will be constant, but it's going to vary among the borrowers, and it's going to vary also among different banks as well. Now all the variations and tuning will no longer at this stage. It transfers everything to here. So this is about the lending rate. Now whether this lending rate here is applicable here, which I'm not sure at this moment. Personally, I believe it shall be in accordance to this and this, depending on the period of time. If you know the answer about this, feel free to enlighten me, which I also wish to learn. With that, this is all about the interest part under clause 30 of PAM contract related to the certificates and payment.